A similar thing to the forum problem is I'm writing these articles for Knife Steel Nerds, and we're getting a good reception and everything. But again, it's frustrating writing individual articles because I write a new article. I write how to heat treat S30V, the steel I talked about in the mid 2000s. And so I say, okay, first you austenitize the steel. Okay, now I have to explain what austenitizing is, because every article is its own thing. I'm like linking back to an article on austenitizing, trying to explain the minimum so that I can then say how to austenitize the steel. I'm like, okay, then you quench. Quenching is this. And here's a link to an article on what. So like every time I'm writing an article, it's like, man, there's so many callbacks all the time. It's really frustrating, right? I look at my analytics on my website and nobody clicks on these links. Sometimes people comment like, oh, I got lost in your article. I'm like, yeah, because there's like 15 links in there on stuff you have to know to read this one, because every article can't be 100 pages long. Okay. The solution to this is to write a book. The book will, build from the beginning all the way up to the end so that you can learn everything you need to know about the metallurgy and how the steels work and how you heat treat them and what these different variables do. And that way you get it all in one place instead of this loosely connected series of articles, because the articles are good for like a specific topic or current events or whatever. But if you really want to learn something, I figured the book would be better. So that's what led to Knife Engineering. And that was my first book. That was a great success. And for a while before Magna Cut, that was what I was best known for was that book, Knife Engineer. So the book was a big hit. Everybody seemed to love it. The story of Knife Steel was totally different. Basically a history book, which is ironic because I'm not that interested in history generally. Like, what date was the Revolutionary War? Don't care. I don't need to know. But my dad would tell me stories all the time, like, oh, this guy, he started this knife company. This guy, he came up with this knife design concept. This guy, he came up with this lockup mechanism for folders. I came up with this method in Damascus. And there would be people here and there that would write things, but a lot of times it's kind of self-serving. This guy makes Damascus and he writes every article that's ever come out on history of Damascus. He gives some credit here or there, but he's the star of the show. And so I think, well, I want to do a more complete history of some of those things. And for my own development and interest in how knife steels came to be, how do people develop these? I want to know, like, how did each of these pieces come in place? Who came up with the idea to use this alloying element? Who came up with the idea of high-speed steel? Who came up with the idea of stainless steel? So how did all of these things evolve and how did they do it? I developed steels. Maybe I can also pick up a thing or two from these guys from the past. I'm just Googling tool steel history. It doesn't exist. There's nothing. I type in D2 steel history and it's all either nothing or lies. There's stuff that's made up. I would write articles on individual steels, just do a quick little paragraph on the steel history, and I can't come up with anything. Like it takes me longer to write the history paragraph at the beginning than to write the rest of it. So I've been piecing together all this history. And I'm like, okay, well, I just need to put this together into a book. But the book kept growing and growing and growing because initially I'm like, well, I can't write a history of all of knives because other people have done that better. But to talk about how the knife steels were used, I have to talk about the knife steel companies. And to talk about the custom knife makers who first used the steels, I have to talk about the custom knife makers. And so I'm ordering tons of books, most of them out of print. They cost like $100, $200, $300. My wife's still mad about the really tall stack of books that are on bookshelves and in the attic and everywhere now. She's like, when are you going to get rid of these? I'm like, never. That was way too much work getting all these. And I start looking through old trade journals and scientific journals, trying to piece together the history of the tool steel. I had so many sleepless nights, just hundreds and hundreds of hours on this book. Again, I think history is boring, but what I was able to find was stories. So that's why the book is called The Story of Knife Steel. The story is more interesting than the events and the dates. If you learn about a guy who's like grows up from a poor family, and then he pursues his passion with the help of people along the way. He's able to work for these different companies as a chemist or a metallurgist. Then he tries something weird and it works and it becomes stainless steel. Those are the interesting stories. I found tons of these stories in obscure books that no one reads. I basically just excerpt them. I take the interesting parts and I give the history of like this metallurgist or that metallurgist, this knife company founder, this custom knife maker. It became this huge story. The book is way too long. It'll make people not want to buy it. But every chapter is its own thing. Every chapter is interesting about a different person, a different element of how things developed over time. Anyone's interested in how the knife market became the way it is, or anyone interested in how did steel become the way it is, both of them are in the book. And you can see a lot of pictures of cool knives and Damascus and stuff as well.